Why did everyone fall silent the moment she stepped into the room? It wasn't rank, it wasn't medals. It was something older, quieter. A presence that didn't need introduction. It simply existed, and the air adjusted around it. Chief Petty Officer Mara Voss moved like someone who had walked through more danger than she'd ever describe. Someone who knew what fear could do and, more importantly, what silence could do back. Fort Ashland smelled like steel, jet fuel, and ego. A joint forces training facility, where Army executed, Marines challenged, Air Force calculated, and Navy observed. But one observation was enough to shift a room. Mara set her duffel down, spine straight, eyes scanning. Not suspicious, not tense, just aware. The kind of aware that comes from counting exits without appearing to look. The kind of calm earned by watching people break and learning not to break with them. She didn't speak, didn't introduce herself. She didn't need to, because respect doesn't always enter with sound. Sometimes it arrives with footsteps. Across the table, Captain Riggs leaned back in his chair, posture loud, chin lifted, authority practiced like a habit. A man used to owning the room long before he earned it. His eyes tracked her movements, waiting for a misstep, a stumble, anything to confirm what his pride hoped, that she didn't belong here. But she did. She belonged anywhere she chose to stand. "Chief Voss," someone finally asked, clearing their throat like they weren't sure if sound was allowed near her quiet. She nodded once, controlled, efficient. Acknowledgement without effort. It said everything. Yes, I am who you think I am. And no, I don't need to prove it to you. Riggs offered a smile that didn't touch his eyes. Temporary assignment, I hear. Cross-branch training. She looked at him, unreadable, temporary. Nothing added, no desire to justify. He gestured toward the table. "We run a pretty tight ship here." "Navy standard should fit then," she replied, tone soft, neutral, unbothered. A couple junior officers looked down to hide smirks. He'd handed her the opening. She returned nothing but truth. Truth stings louder than insults. Riggs cleared his throat, then tapped the map on the table. Operation simulation, urban extraction, timed. He explained routes, response points, support positions. His plan sounded confident. It also sounded wrong. When he finished, she didn't hesitate. She raised one hand slightly, not to challenge, but because precision required timing. "Sir, your secondary route crosses open terrain in line of mock hostiles. You'll lose 3 people by minute 5. Silence. A still kind, like the moment before glass cracks. Riggs blinked, then forced a composed laugh. "We've run this scenario plenty of times, Chief." She nodded once, slow, respectful yet sharp. "And that's why you're used to losing it." The room inhaled, one collective breath held too long. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't ego. It was fact delivered without emotion, without insult. Truth in its rawest form. Riggs' jaw flexed. She watched without watching, not to provoke, but because she never looked away first. Aggression was noise. Control was quiet. "Noted," he said tightly. "We'll proceed as planned." Her expression didn't change. No smirk, no challenge, just acceptance of reality, his, not hers. There are battles you fight, and battles you let arrogance fight for you. Later, outside on the training field, recruits whispered her name like it carried weight. Quiet weight, the kind that didn't need retelling, only acknowledgement. Some eyes held curiosity. Some skepticism. A few, resentment. The quiet kind that grows in shadow when dignity threatens insecurity. Power recognizes challenge, even if challenge says nothing at all. Myra walked the field before dawn, boots silent on the dust-coated concrete. She didn't bark orders, didn't posture or pace like authority needed dramatics. She simply observed. breathing steady, presence anchored deep. Then she stopped beside the lined-up trainees. "Listen," she said softly. They waited, confused. "To what?" one asked. She closed her eyes, inhaling slowly. The moment before noise, the breath before movement, the silence where decision forms. Blank stares, murmured confusion. Patience, she reminded herself. Not everyone learned from storms. Some first had to learn from stillness. "You don't control chaos by outrunning it," she continued. "You master it by recognizing the second before it arrives, and owning that second." A young soldier frowned. "Ma'am, we're trained to move fast." She opened her eyes, and the world sharpened around them. Fast comes later. First comes knowing when not to move. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Authority isn't always sound. Sometimes it's gravity. They watched her walk the field, a silent metronome of discipline, tapping her boot once at each pause, marking breath, marking presence. Most didn't understand yet. A few did. Understanding always begins small, then spreads like quiet fire. By noon, rumors moved faster than footsteps. She disarmed someone once without throwing a punch. She walked into a hostage standoff unarmed. She stopped a fight before it started just by looking at the guy. None of the stories were bragged. They were whispered, and whispers travel further than boasts ever do. Riggs heard the whispers too. He forced a laugh, but the sound cracked in places he hoped no one noticed. Power feels threatened not by noise, but by silence strong enough to hold its own. That evening she stood in the hangar, hands tucked behind her back, watching recruits run drills. They moved fast, too fast. Speed without awareness. Energy without control. One stumbled. Another misread a move. Someone cursed under their breath. Mara didn't flinch. Mistakes weren't failure, panic was. She waited until they finished, sweat heavy on their brows, breath ragged. "Again," she said softly. A groan rolled through the group. "But slower now," she added. Slower forces control. Control builds instinct. Instinct saves lives. A trainee muttered, "Feels like meditation, not training." She turned to him, gaze steady. "Tell that to the men who died thinking speed beats precision." He swallowed, said nothing more. Her tone wasn't harsh. It was truth dressed in patience. The hardest lessons arrive without shouting. Later, standing alone, she leaned against a crate and breathed. Slow, measured, present. Silence wasn't absence. It was discipline. It was survival. And sometimes, it was the only thing that kept the past where it belonged. A door opened behind her, footsteps heavy, determined. "Riggs." He stood too close, a man trying to regain territory he felt slipping. "You run things differently," he said, voice wrapped in forced neutrality. "I run them effectively," she answered. He smirked, "My unit, my command." She nodded once. "I have no interest in command, only competency." For a second his pride flinched. "You embarrassed me earlier," he muttered. She looked at him unblinking. "Truth did that, not me." He exhaled sharp, turning away, unable to meet calm with calm. Ego survives through noise. Silence feels like threat to those who fear themselves. She didn't chase the moment. Didn't press. She simply let it settle, and settled moments reveal character. Days passed. Her methods didn't change. Her tone didn't raise. Her discipline didn't bend. But the room did. The soldiers did. Respect reshaped itself quietly. Real respect always does. Some mornings, she caught whispers when she walked by. She sees everything. She doesn't talk much. She doesn't need to. If admiration has a sound, it's the quiet shift of posture when someone walks past who earned it. One evening, She lingered in the armory longer than usual, fingers tracing the steel of a disassembled weapon. Not as a tool, but as a reminder. Weapons don't grant power. Choice does. Discipline does. Restraint does. Control isn't about force. It's about knowing when force isn't needed. As she reassembled the slide, voices echoed from the doorway, young soldiers debating training methods. Her way feels different. Yeah, but did you see how she handled that panic drill? Bro, she didn't even raise her voice. That's the point, she doesn't need to. A ghost of a smile touched her lips, not pride, not satisfaction, recognition. Growth always starts with confusion, then resistance, then quiet acceptance. She finished securing the frame and set the weapon down. The metal gleamed, harmless without intent, like most things misused by insecurity. She wiped her hands, stood, and walked out, each step measured, each breath steady. And in the distance, she could feel it, a tension building. Not fear. Not threat. Inevitable collision. Two kinds of power cannot share space for long. One earned quietly. One demanded loudly. Silence always wins, but noise always picks the fight first. What happens when silence threatens the wrong kind of authority? Sometimes people don't fear strength, they fear what reminds them they lack it. And insecurity, when cornered, doesn't retreat. It hunts. The first sign wasn't loud. It was subtle, a shift in glances, a tightening of shoulders, a whisper that tasted more like warning than gossip. Mara noticed it not in what people said, but what they didn't. Eyes that once met hers now glanced away too quickly. Small groups paused their conversations when she approached. Not disrespect. Not rejection. Something else. Movement before storm. By sunrise, she stood on the training yard, breath visible in the cold air, watching recruits tighten their straps and steel their nerves. Silence again, but not hers this time, theirs. They weren't avoiding her. They were bracing. The exercise briefing crackled over the speaker, Captain Riggs' voice sharp, clipped, and too polished to be calm. Urban evac scenario, hostile territory, vehicle extraction, fast execution. Mara's jaw set. Vast. Aggressive. Impatient. Speed isn't strategy, it's ego on a stopwatch. She stepped forward, hold. The room paused not because she ordered, but because she didn't need to. Sir, you've removed the secondary cover team, she said evenly. That leaves blind angles across 4 entry points. His eyes flicked to her, forced grin, tightened jaw. Chief, this drill needs urgency. Your mindful breathing approach is inspiring, I'm sure, but we move fast here. A few chuckles from officers who didn't even believe themselves. The insecure laugh at power when they think it won't turn. She didn't smile. Urgency without structure kills soldiers. Someone winced. Someone else inhaled sharply. Truth is offensive when ego stands in the blast radius. Riggs stepped closer, voice low enough for only her to hear, or so he thought. I won't let you undermine my command in my house. She didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Just answered with the calm that was her weapon. Command isn't location, Captain, it's competence. A muscle in his cheek twitched, small but telling. Fear disguised as fury. She didn't push further, she didn't have to. Silence did the rest. He raised his hand sharply, execute the drill. And just like that, the Humvee engines roared, boots thundered across the gravel, helmets fastened, weapons checked. Mara watched angles. Watched trajectories. Watched danger gather like storm clouds waiting for wind. Then she saw it, a recruit moving into a blind corner behind an accelerating Humvee, just out of the driver's line of sight. Stop. Calm, controlled, clear. No one listened. Noise always drowns wisdom in the beginning. The vehicle surged forward. She didn't think. Thinking was for before. Now was reflex trained by grief, sharpened by memory, etched by lives she once saved and lives she didn't. She sprinted, boots slicing gravel, body cutting air. One palm slammed the hood, open hand, not fist. The sound cracked across the field. Her other arm snatched the recruit's vest and yanked him clear as the tire skimmed fabric. Dust exploded. Gas hissed. Silence fell heavy and fast. The young soldier stared at her, breath shaking, shock wide in his eyes, like someone who just realized life is fragile enough to fit inside 1 second. Riggs stood frozen. Hands clenched, breath caught. The truth hit him harder than any reprimand could. She didn't just correct him. She prevented him from killing his own. He barked, voice cracking, "Chief Voss, you do not countermand me in front of my unit." She stood straight, eyes steady. Safety isn't countermanding, it's leadership. No anger. No triumph. Just truth again. The quiet kind that exposes weakness in people who only know volume. Riggs' chest heaved. "You're relieved." A ripple passed through the ranks, confusion, disbelief, rage, fear, like air reacting to lightning before thunder chooses where to land. She nodded once. No argument. Because arguing with insecurity only feeds it. Discipline means knowing which fights aren't yours to fight. She walked away, and in that walk, shoulders relaxed, steps measured, silence carried like armor. She earned more loyalty than any shouted order could ever demand. Some soldiers straightened unconsciously when she passed. No salute. Respect doesn't always need ritual. In the mess hall later, whispers traveled table to table like a current no one could stop. She saved him. Riggs almost killed that kid. She didn't even raise her voice. Who fires the person who prevents a death? But whispers also mutate, and insecurity doesn't die, it seeks allies. She thinks she's better than command. She's Navy, this is Army ground. She wants to take over. Fear builds stories faster than truth does. Mara sat alone at the far end of the room. Not isolated, she chose space like others choose weapons. Breathing steady, posture relaxed, fork untouched beside cooling food. Hungry people chase power. Centered people wait for power to reveal itself. She wasn't thinking about Riggs. She was remembering a desert years ago, heat shimmering off sand, a boy shaking with a rifle too big for his arms, and her voice whispering, "Don't move yet. Don't give chaos your first breath." A life saved then. Another today. Different terrain, same discipline. She heard boots approach. Young lieutenant, nervous energy. He stood before her like someone standing too close to a statue, reverent, unsure if he should be there. "Ma'am," voice stiff, careful, respectful. "Most of us know what happened today wasn't justice." She looked up, not hard, not soft, present. "Justice doesn't always arrive quickly," she answered. He swallowed. "If you need anything, backup, statements, whatever, some of us are with you." She studied him for a heartbeat. Not judging, acknowledging. "Loyalty is earned in silence," she said quietly. "Thank you." He nodded and left. He didn't feel dismissed. He felt seen. And that's why people followed her, not out of fear but clarity. That night, her boots echoed down the empty barracks hallway. Light buzzed overhead. Adrenaline slowly fatting into stillness. She entered the armory, locked the door behind her, and set her gear down. Routine matters most when the world tries to shake you off balance. She disassembled her sidearm, piece by methodical piece. No rush. Breath in, motion. Breath out, stillness. Control doesn't sleep. Some people clean weapons to avoid thoughts. She cleaned hers to honor restraint. A gun in the wrong hands is noise. In disciplined hands, it is silence waiting to be broken only when absolutely earned. Halfway through a barrel inspection, the door clicked open. She didn't startle. Startle wastes energy. Startle means you weren't present. Captain Riggs entered. Uniform slightly rumpled, eyes too wild for someone supposedly in command. Bottle cap visible in his fist, not full, not empty. The dangerous middle where decisions rot. He shut the door. No words at first. Just breathing, sharp, uneven, pulled through teeth like someone trying to swallow humiliation. She continued cleaning, not to disrespect him, but because panic doesn't earn your attention until it chooses direction. "You think you're above me," he finally spat. She didn't look up. "I think hierarchy means nothing without competence." He flinched at the word. Competence, the one authority he could not counterfeit. "You embarrass me today. You undermine me." She placed the cleaned barrel down gently. "Your actions embarrassed you. I prevented a casualty." His fist tightened around the bottle cap until plastic creaked. "This is my base," he hissed, "my authority." She finally met his eyes. Calm, precise, unshakable. Authority isn't territory, it's responsibility. He stepped closer, breathing thick with whatever emotion sat festering under his skin. Anger, fear, pride, all blending into something volatile. "You don't belong here." "Then send me back," she replied simply. He didn't move. Didn't blink. Because he knew sending her away wouldn't erase what she represented. She stood for the thing he once thought he had, and lost somewhere between ambition and arrogance. Silence stretched. Not calm silence, charged silence. The kind that waits to see which human breaks first. His hand shook. Then the moment fractured. He reached for her weapon. Wrong move, wrong moment, wrong target. Not attack, not yet. Just grabbing it like someone trying to reclaim something he didn't understand, control. Except the gun was in parts. And she had the slide, not him. He held the frame uselessly. A weapon without function. Power without purpose. She didn't lunge. Didn't raise her voice. Only placed the slide down slowly and said, "Control isn't taken, it's kept." His face twisted, something collapsing behind his eyes. He set the frame down like it burned. "You think your silence makes you strong." "No," she said softly. "It reminds others when they are weak." That broke him more than any insult. He turned and stormed out, door slamming with force meant to prove something, but proving only that he had lost something instead. She finished reassembling the weapon. Calm, deliberate, measured. Every piece clicked back into place, order returning where chaos tried to enter. Then she locked it away. Control is not stored in steel. It is stored in breath. Outside, the hallway lights flickered, not ominous, just tired. Like the building itself, new tension when it walked through the air. As she stepped out, a young private who pretended to be sweeping looked up nervously. "Ma'am, everything okay?" She paused and offered the rarest thing she ever gave, reassurance. "Yes." The boy exhaled like someone who didn't realize he'd been holding his breath. She walked on. Behind her, the broom handle tapped the ground, not nervous anymore, steadier somehow. The effect of composure spreads without announcements. When she reached her quarters, she sat on the edge of the bed. No lights on. No boots removed yet. Just stillness. A long breath. Not relief, readiness. Storms don't break strong people. They reveal them. And somewhere in the building, footsteps paced too hard, too late, too loud. Sound always struggle when dignity refuses to raise its voice. Tomorrow would not be quiet. But neither was she afraid. Silent doesn't mean passive. Silent means prepared. And the world had just learned. You do not corner someone whose calm is earned in places louder than fear. How does a storm announce itself when pride is its thunder? Not with roar, not with warning, with small shifts, the kind only someone trained to watch breath before action would notice. The next morning, heat rose early over Fort Ashland, stretching across concrete like fatigue crawling through bone. Myra stood outside at dawn, watching light creep across the tarmac. She didn't stretch, didn't pace, just breathed slow, steady, aligned with the rhythm she built her life around. Composure wasn't habit, it was defense. Because chaos rarely attacks from outside, it usually comes disguised as command. She felt eyes watching long before she turned. A young corporal who pretended to check gear, but kept glancing her way like someone holding a question they didn't know how to ask. She spoke first, soft as the morning air. "You're awake early." He straightened instinctively. "Just prepping for drills, ma'am." A lie gentle and unpolished. He had come to see if she was all right. "You saw something yesterday," she said. He looked down. We all did. Silence held between them, not awkward, just true. The kind that builds respect instead of demanding it. She nodded once, appreciation disguised as acknowledgement. He nodded back, courage disguised as duty, and walked away. This base had changed in days. Not because of her rank, but her refusal to need one. Respect earned in quiet makes more noise than orders ever will. In the mess hall later, trays clattered, forks scraped, low murmurs moved like uncertain wind. People weren't avoiding her. They were orbiting her. Curiosity has gravity. She chose a seat against the wall, not paranoia, just habit. Never sit where you can't see exits. Never trust a room more than your instincts. Someone approached. Not footsteps, presence first, footsteps second. She glanced up. Major Eileen Hart. Sharp eyes, firm shoulders, a face carved by decisions she didn't regret but wished she didn't remember so clearly. She sat down without asking, authority born from competence, not ego. "You made quite the impression," Hart murmured. Myra took a slow sip of black coffee. "I taught a drill." "You challenged a captain." "I corrected a mistake." Hart's lips twitched, not a smile, something sharper. Correction feels like threat to those unsure of themselves. Truth acknowledged. Truth shared. Hart lowered her voice. "Watch him, his pride isn't wounded, it's bleeding. Wounded men heal. Bleeding ones reach for weapons." Mara didn't ask who she meant. She didn't need names. Pride only wears one face, no matter who owns it. "I'm aware," Mara replied quietly. Hart studied her for 3 long seconds. "You have restraint," she said. "Impressive restraint, but restraint can be mistaken as permission." Mara didn't flinch. "I don't give permission." "No," Hart corrected softly. "You just don't react. Sometimes silence is more dangerous than a punch." Mara looked at her coffee, steam rising in thin lines like breath leaving a tired body. "Reaction gives someone else the wheel," she said. "Silence keeps your hands on it." Hart leaned back, weighing that, respect in her eyes now rare heavy. "Just know this," she murmured. "When ego can't win quietly, it tries to win violently." Myra held her gaze, then it already lost. Hart stood, the conversation ending the moment she decided it did, not abrupt, just complete. And that's when Mara felt it, like temperature shifting before rain. The sensation of someone staring too long, from too close. Captain Riggs stood at the mess hall entrance, jaw tight, fists curled, pretending to talk to another officer but eyes locked on her. Threat isn't in the weapon. Threat is in the tremor behind the hand holding it. She finished her coffee. Stood. Walked past him without slowing. He exhaled sharply. the sound of someone realizing they were invisible to the person they hoped feared them. Nothing stings ego like being ignored. Outside, her steps echoed down pavement, still holding night's chill. Training whistles blew in the distance. Engines rumbled near the motor pool. Routine continued, as if tension wasn't crawling underneath it. She was halfway across the field when she heard it. "Was?" She stopped, turned slowly. Riggs walked toward her, expression tight, words loaded before they left his mouth. "Office now." No context. No accusation. Just command sharpened by desperation. She followed not because she obeyed him, but because control means choosing where confrontation happens. Inside his office, blinds half closed like guilt half hidden, he shut the door too forcefully. Paper trembled on the desk. "You undermined my authority," he said. "You humiliated me." "You endangered a soldier," she answered. He stepped closer, too close, breath sharp with someone who hadn't slept or had slept wrong. "You think silence makes you powerful." "No," she said calmly, "discipline does." His voice rose. "I won't be disrespected." "You were corrected. You don't outrank me. Rank isn't competence." A vein pulsed in his neck. Anger now not sharp but desperate. "Dangerous. You're here temporarily. I've built this unit." She offered the quiet truth that hurts most. "Then you should act like someone worth following." For a second, a fragile second, his face cracked. Fear showed behind anger. Insecurity behind command. He slammed his palm on the desk. "You're confined to base quarters until further notice." She blinked once, that was it. Not surprise. Calculation. On what grounds? Failure to follow command, he snapped. Disrupting training, provoking personnel. He didn't believe his own reasons. A lie always wobbles in its delivery. She set her jaw. "I'll contact oversight." His smile was tight, brittle, breaking at the edges. "I already did." He expected panic. He got silence. Silence is not absence, it's strategy. She stepped toward the door. "Chief," his voice strained, "this isn't over." She turned her head slightly. "It never is, that's the problem." A quiet war had already begun, not fought with bullets but consequences. Outside again, sunlight felt harsher. Wind sharper. Footsteps heavier. But her breathing stayed steady. Preparation, not fear. A young recruit rushed up, eyes wide. "Chief, rumor is they're writing you up, trying to remove you." She studied his face, earnest, frightened, loyal. Rumors are panic dressed as information. But is it true? It doesn't matter. He swallowed. Why not? She looked past him at the training field. Because truth doesn't rush, it arrives. He didn't understand. Not yet. Understanding takes time, pain helps. By late afternoon, the base moved strangely, like a body with a hidden injury. People walked normally, but eyes flicked around corners. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Salutes paused half a beat too long. Tension lived in the spaces between routine. Mara stood in the hangar doorway, arms folded behind her back, posture honest, unshaken. When Hart found her again, there was no warning in her voice. Just fatigue. They're trying to blame you for today's near accident. Trying is not succeeding. Intent matters, Hart murmured. Outcome matters more. Hart stared at her. You know, most people break before this point, right? Mara finally looked at her, emotion not visible, but present like breath in winter air. Most people haven't lived in worse places than this. Hart nodded, steel forming in her eyes not for herself, but respect for someone who learned resilience in places she only read about in reports marked classified. Stay sharp, Hart said. I always am. When night fell, the base went quiet in a way that wasn't rest. She returned to her quarters, sat on the edge of the bed again, boots still on, uniform jacket still worn. She didn't rest, didn't close her eyes, just breathed. Slow, measured, present. Stillness doesn't mean pause. Stillness means readiness. And then a knock. Not loud. 3 taps, hesitant. She unlocked the door. A soldier, barely out of adolescence, uniform wrinkled, fear shaking through him like adrenaline without direction. Chief Voss, Captain Riggs, he's in the ops room. He's drinking. He's saying he'll fix this tonight. She held the door steady with one hand. Fix what? He said he won't be humiliated again. Her breath didn't shift. Not shock, confirmation. Fear isn't the loud moment. Fear is the quiet before someone does something irreversible. Where is he exactly? Operations room, alone, but people are watching him, whispering. Did he call for me? The private swallowed. No, but I think he wants you there. Or wanted excuses for consequences. Go back to your quarters, she said. Stay out of it. But that's in order. He froze. Nodded. Ran. She stepped into the hallway. Doors closed. Lights hummed. Air tasted like anticipation and regret. She walked. Not fast. Not slow. With purpose calibrated to inevitability. What happens when silence refuses to be swallowed by noise? Noise panics. Noise lashes out. Noise reaches for force because it fears stillness more than defeat. She reached the operations room. Hand hovered near the handle, not hesitating, just reading the moment. Then she opened the door. Lights low. A bottle on the table. Riggs hunched over documents, breathing heavy, fingers trembling around a sidearm he shouldn't have had out of the armory. Control had left the room long before she entered. He looked up, eyes glassy, pride bleeding through cracked composure. You shouldn't be here. You summoned me, she answered quietly. He laughed, a brittle breaking sound. No, you just show up wherever power tries to breathe. She stepped forward, hands relaxed at her sides. Not defensive. Not aggressive. Prepared. You don't need to do this. His jaw shook. His pride didn't. Oh, I do, he whispered, because they need to see who commands this place. His hand lifted the weapon slightly, not pointed yet, but too close to meaning. That's when the moment froze, the same way it freezes right before a storm breaks open. She spoke first, voice soft enough to cut through noise and arrogance at once. Don't mistake desperation for authority. He lifted the gun higher. And the world held its breath. Stillness didn't break. Stillness sharpened. Because she understood something men like him never learned. Power doesn't come from pulling the trigger. Power comes from knowing you don't have to. What happened next wasn't fate. It was discipline. It was inevitability. It was the quiet edge between violence and certainty, where only those trained by silence can stand and not tremble. And in that breath before consequence, she exhaled once slow, grounded, resolute. Storms don't frighten those who have lived inside them. They steady themselves and decide who flinches first. What does a moment feel like right before someone loses themselves? Not loud. Not chaotic. Just thin. As if reality stretches so tight it could tear with one breath out of place. Mara stood inside the operations room, air still and trembling around the edges. Riggs held the gun not with control, but with panic disguised as authority. His hand shook slightly, shoulders tight, jaw clenched so hard veins surfaced in his neck. There are 2 kinds of danger in this world. The kind that wants power, and the kind terrified of losing it. The second one pulls triggers faster. She didn't move, didn't blink. Her breathing still steady, quiet enough to be mistaken as calm, but really it was precision. Years of training wrapped around every heartbeat. Riggs stared at her like she was the mirror he'd spent his life avoiding. A reflection that didn't care about rank, or noise, or titles. "Say something," he demanded. Silence answered first, because silence always arrives before wisdom or disaster. Then she spoke, voice low, composed, almost gentle. "I won't fight you." His grip tightened. "Don't patronize me. I'm not." Truth again, delivered in a tone so even it only made his instability louder. He stepped closer. The gun didn't press yet, just hovered between fear and intent. "You think you're above consequence," he hissed. "No," she said softly, "I just understand mine." The words weren't defiance. They were clarity, and clarity is the one thing ego cannot survive. Something flickered in his eyes, panic, shame, confusion, something unstable enough to collapse into violence with the wrong spark. Her voice dropped lower, nearly a whisper. "Put the weapon down, Captain." He exhaled hard through his teeth. "Everyone here looks at you like you own them." "No," she replied. "They look at you like you're losing yourself." His face twitched. Truth always cuts deepest when spoken quietly. He laughed once, sharp, broken. "You ruined my command." "You sabotaged your own command," she corrected. "I just didn't help hide it." Riggs flinched, wounded pride, exposed like an open nerve. "You don't understand what it's like to be questioned," he snapped. "I understand what it's like to earn respect instead of demand it." That line wasn't meant to wound. But truth often bleeds the ones who resist it. His finger twitched against the trigger. Enough to be noticed. Enough to be lethal. And still she didn't raise her hands. Didn't step back. Didn't give him fear to feed on. In a voice softer than threat, but sharper than warning, she murmured, "You don't want to do this." His breathing turned ragged, desperate. "I already did." One step too close, gun lifting, air thinning. Silence coiled tight around them. If someone outside had walked by, they might have heard nothing but two breaths, one steady, one fracturing. Then he pressed the barrel to her temple. The steel was cold. But colder was the realization in his eyes. He wasn't testing her anymore. He was testing himself. Fear doesn't always show as weakness. Sometimes it shows as violence. He whispered, voice frayed at the edges. "You think you're untouchable." She didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Didn't swallow. Instead, calmly, "No one is untouchable, but not everyone breaks." "That scares you, doesn't it?" she added after a breath. He shook his head too fast. "No." But the lie showed in his eyes. Silence pressed in again, suffocating for him, liberating for her. "Pull the trigger," she murmured. "If you believe this is strength, finish it." He froze. His hand shook harder. Not because he wanted to, but because now he didn't know if he could. Power isn't the ability to act. Power is the choice not to when you want it most. She leaned the smallest fraction toward the gun, not threat, but invitation. The way someone removes illusion from a coward. If you were truly in control, you wouldn't need a weapon. His breath broke. His arm wavered. She whispered again, soft enough to sound like mercy, strong enough to feel like correction. Fear dressed as power isn't leadership. For a heartbeat, the world held still. Everything balanced on whether his ego collapsed inward or exploded outward. Then her voice, a final quiet blade. "You're not dangerous, you're scared." He snapped. Anger flared, not in movement, but in his face, contorting with humiliation too heavy for him to survive gracefully. And in that microsecond, the one moment where desperation outweighs reason, he pushed harder instead of stepping back. But she didn't panic. She didn't rush. She didn't lash out. She moved when time moved, and time obeyed her first. Left hand rose slowly, not grabbing, guiding. Redirecting his wrist with gentle precision. Right hand snapped the slide clean. Magazine released, round ejected. 2 seconds. No force. Only choice. By the time he blinked, the weapon lay in pieces, harmless like truth that refused to escalate into violence. He stumbled backward. Shock cracked across his face. She placed the disarmed weapon on the table, steady and quiet, then stepped back. No victory. No triumph. Just discipline. Sit, she said softly. He didn't move. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't threaten. I'm not your enemy, she said. You are. His legs buckled. He sank into the chair like someone, suddenly aware of their own weight. Men break loudly. Women break quietly. Leaders break only if they choose to. She turned toward the door. Paused only once. You can still salvage yourself, she said without looking back, but not if you lie to who you are. No response. Just shallow breaths behind her. She left him there, not defeated, but facing himself for the first time. And that is the harshest battlefield. Outside, the hallway felt different. Air cleaner. Silence purposeful instead of tense. A pair of soldiers pretended not to have been standing too close to the door. Mara walked past. Neither spoke. Respect doesn't ask for applause. It teaches people to quiet themselves. She made it halfway to her quarters before Major Hart intercepted her, posture firm, voice low. You reported it. He did, Mara replied, accidentally. Hart studied her reading posture, breath, steadiness. You didn't hurt him. No. You could have. Yes. Hart breathed out, not relief, not disbelief, something closer to respect born in heavy places. Everything will move quickly now, Hart murmured. Oversight, command review. Mara looked at the ground for a moment, the weight of memory tugging at her before she locked it back into discipline. I didn't come here to dismantle anyone, she said. Hart nodded. People dismantle themselves. A quiet truth. A heavy one. What will happen to him? Mara asked. Not out of pity, empathy still exists in soldiers who survived without losing themselves. Psych eval, command suspension, then whatever the system decides. Systems don't decide, Mara replied softly. People do. Hart's eyes softened with something unspoken, recognition, maybe admiration, maybe knowing. You're not like most, she said. Mara shook her head once. No, I'm exactly like anyone who learned the cost of losing control. She started walking again. Hart didn't follow. Some journeys you walk alone, especially the ones that matter. As she approached her door, a group of recruits stood by the barracks, trying not to stare, trying not to be obvious, failing at both. Their expressions said more than words ever could. Fear, relief, awe, confusion. A quiet understanding forming. Strength doesn't yell. Strength breathes. One young soldier stepped forward, awkward, nervous. Chief, is it true? You didn't even raise your voice. She looked at him for a long second, then answered with a softness sharper than pride. If your voice is your only weapon, you came unarmed. He swallowed, then nodded. Not because he fully understood, but because he wanted to. She walked inside her quarters, closed the door, leaned against the wall, and exhaled not relief, not exhaustion. Clarity. Control isn't about dominating chaos. It's about refusing to become it. She sat, unlaced her boots slowly, hands steady even now. People think restraint is weakness. They confuse silence with surrender. They mistake calm for passivity. But silence is choice. Stillness is strength. Restraint is the highest form of power. Because anyone can explode. Only the strong refuse to. Outside, night began to fall. Inside, she layered quiet like armor. And somewhere across the base, a man sat in an empty room, realizing he had mistaken volume for power, and lost to silence that never even raised a hand. Sometimes command isn't taken. Sometimes it collapses under the weight of who earned it more. Mara closed her eyes not to rest, but to find center again. Calm isn't absence of battle. Calm is victory before battle begins. And tomorrow, she knew, the world would start asking questions. Not about him. About her. But people forget, dignity doesn't need defense. It simply exists, and watches those without it crumble trying to imitate it. Why does quiet feel heavier after someone tries to break it? Not because danger passed, but because truth lingers when violence fails. And today, truth hung in the air at Fort Ashland like smoke after a shot never fired. Mara woke before dawn again. Not from fear. From discipline. Fear wakes quickly, discipline wakes on time. Boots laced, shirt tucked, hair tied tight, not rigid, just prepared. Preparation is peace for those who survived relying on it. When she stepped outside, the world was gray and half awake. Shadows long, sky uncertain, base silent except for distant generators humming like tired hearts. She didn't walk with hurry. She walked with presence. Eyes tracked her, not openly, not boldly, but with the subtle urgency of people learning which person in the room truly understands danger. And today she could feel it. The base didn't know whether to fear her, admire her, or follow her. Power does that when it chooses quiet instead of conquest. A pair of MPs approached, stiff posture, nervous professionalism. Not hostile. Not relaxed. Chief Voss, one said, oversight wants you in command, review room 1 at 900 hours. She nodded. Not surprised. Not moved. You'll walk me, she replied, not as request as courtesy. They exchanged looks, relief disguised as discipline. Nothing unsettles soldiers more than someone impossible to rattle. She continued walking, scanning the horizon like she expected something, not attack, but awakening. A recruit jogging by slowed as he saw her, breath uneven, eyes searching hers for something. Permission, courage, validation. He finally spoke, voice respectful but trembling. Ma'am, they say you disarmed him without hurting him. She paused, not turning fully, just enough. Strength doesn't panic, she said. He swallowed, so the rumors are true. She looked forward again. Rumor is noise, truth is breath. He frowned, trying to understand. Young minds often chase action before reflection. She continued, without waiting for comprehension. Don't learn fear from loud men, she added. Learn composure from quiet ones. And she walked on, leaving him standing like a student who just realized class had already started before he took his seat. At the field, drills began. Shouts, boots, grit, sweat. But underneath it all, something else. Attention threaded through routine, like wire under cloth. Major Hart stepped beside her, hands in pockets, shoulders squared like she'd spent the night deciding whether to defend Mara in a room full of brass, and decided yes, even before they asked. You ready for this? Hart asked. Mara turned slightly. Ready isn't a feeling, it's a choice. Hart's mouth twitched, almost a smile. You know they expect resistance today. They'll receive truth instead. The system reacts poorly to truth. Only when truth exposes pride. Hart studied her. You slept. Enough. Afraid. No. Angry. She shook her head once. I don't waste energy on ego, mine or theirs. Hart exhaled, half in disbelief, half in admiration. Most people train like you, break before they become this calm. Myra's voice softened. Calm wasn't learned, it was earned, the hard way. Hart didn't ask about the hard way. Some scars don't need narrating to be believed. Outside, soldiers ran drills, but their eyes flicked toward the two women as if history was unfolding quietly, and they didn't know whether to salute it, study it, or fear it. Then the sound. Footsteps hurried, too fast for morning calm, too urgent for routine. A sergeant rushed toward them, face pale, one hand gripping a clipboard like a lifeline. Captain Riggs, he started, breath shaky. He's being escorted off-site. Hart's jaw tightened, already. Yes, ma'am, oversight arrived, he didn't take it well. Mara didn't react. Her stillness was not cold. It was protective of him, of them, of the truth that violence wasn't needed to end a pattern. Is he stable? She asked. The sergeant hesitated. Physically, yes. Mentally, he's not talking, just starring like he's somewhere else. Silence followed, a respectful silence, not fearful. Failure is loud until accountability arrives. Then it becomes quiet, painfully so. Mara inhaled deeper this time. Not relief. Something quieter. Regret, responsibility, or simply acknowledgement that battles without gunfire can still wound the hardest. Go, she told the sergeant. Return to your post. He saluted clumsily, turned and left. Hart looked at her. You didn't break him, he broke himself. Mara's reply was nearly a whisper. I was the mirror, that's enough to shatter some. And in those words sadness, not for him. For a system that raised soldiers to worship rank over control. 900 came like a blade pulled from a sheath. She walked into the command review room with two MPs, not handcuffed, respect, not suspicion. Inside sat 3 officers and 1 civilian investigator, the kind who read truth not from words, but posture. Mara stood in front of them, feet shoulder-width apart, hands behind her in parade rest. Not defensive. Prepared. An admiral cleared his throat. Chief Voss, do you know why you're here? Yes, she said, to determine whether my actions upheld military conduct or threatened command. The civilian leaned forward. And did they? They upheld discipline, she answered calmly, not ego. A colonel frowned. You challenged a commanding officer. I corrected an unsafe protocol. And you refused to back down. I refused to abandon duty. Another silence, this one heavy with truth and politics colliding like storms at sea. The admiral flipped through papers. Walk us through the altercation. There was no altercation. He looked up. Chief. There was a moment, she clarified. A choice. He chose fear, I chose restraint. A younger officer across the table blinked, shocked by the clarity in her tone. What made you confident he wouldn't shoot? He asked. She met his gaze steadily. I wasn't confident. A pause, a long one. Then why didn't you defend yourself? I did. Confusion rippled through the panel. How? The civilian asked. By staying still. The colonel leaned forward, frustrated. That's not defense. It is, she replied, when the threat is instability, not intent. They didn't understand, not all of them. Somewhere behind her, a soldier exhaled in awe. They understood. Why not use force? The admiral pressed. Force wasn't necessary, discipline was. You disarmed him. I prevented escalation. You seized his weapon. No, I removed danger. Silence again, thicker this time, layered with realization chewing through bureaucracy. The civilian finally spoke, voice low, genuine. What do you believe leadership is, Chief Voss? not a hesitation. Leadership is making sure others don't pay for your pride. The room stilled, even air paused, absorbing that. After minutes of tension, whispers between panel members, notes passed, glances exchanged, the Admiral finally straightened. "Chief Voss," he said, tone shifting, "you're cleared, no violations." No applause. Just truth acknowledged. But then he added something no one expected. "And several observers have recommended you for advanced leadership instruction and psychological resilience training command." She blinked once, not surprise, acceptance. She didn't ask for reward. She didn't need it. But dignity recognized can still be honored. "Will you accept the assignment if offered?" he asked. Myra shifted slightly, emotion almost invisible but full of weight. "I will serve where I'm needed." Hart, standing near the door, exhaled softly, pride hidden beneath discipline. As they dismissed her, one junior officer, eyes sharp, posture straighter now, asked quietly, "Chief, what would you have done if he pulled the trigger?" Myra paused in the doorway. "Not long, just long enough." "I would have responded," she said softly, "but only after the world confirmed there was no other way." That's the difference between power and restraint. Power reacts. Restraint waits to see if power was ever necessary. Outside, sunlight warmed the concrete. Wind moved flags. The base breathed easier. When she stepped back onto the field, soldiers stopped talking. Not out of fear. Out of respect so strong it silenced ego. A young woman approached, shaking slightly. "Chief, I thought strength meant pushing harder. Now I think maybe it means knowing when not to." Myra looked at her, truly looked. "Strength is deciding what deserves your reaction," she said, "and what doesn't earn it." The woman nodded, tears threatening but held back, not weakness, control learning to rise. Myra walked away, not like someone victorious, but like someone returning to duty. Respect followed, not applause, not cheers, just posture adjusting, heart steadying. Not worship. Recognition. In the distance, a group ran drills slower now, aware now, breathing before moving. Her influence spreading like quiet tide across sand. She picked up her duffel from her quarters, paused, and looked back once. Not sentiment, acknowledgement. Not regret, gratitude for lessons, even the brutal ones. She walked toward the gate, transfer papers pending, future unknown but already shaped by choice, not noise. Behind her, soldiers watched, some with pride, some with humility, some with awe. And somewhere in a medical wing hours away, a broken captain stared at a wall, learning the hardest truth. Sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one who never raised their voice. Mara stepped into sunlight and didn't look back again. Some chapters close without slamming doors. Some victories don't need witnesses. Some strength speaks only when silence finishes its sentence. And dignity. It never argues. It simply walks forward and lets the world notice. Why does peace feel heavier after war? Not because danger is gone, but because silence asks questions violence never lets you hear. Weeks passed, yet the echoes of Fort Ashland didn't fade, they settled. Transferred orders came, bags packed not with excitement but with inevitability. A new assignment, a new command, a new room filled with strangers who would stare and whisper before understanding. Mara boarded the transport aircraft with that familiar quiet, a stillness earned, not inherited. A duffel slung over her shoulder, a sealed set of orders in her hand. She didn't look back at the base gates. Goodbyes are not always spoken. Sometimes they breathe out with the dust your boots leave behind. Inside the aircraft, soldiers already seated shifted subtly when she passed, not out of fear, but awareness, like they could feel the discipline in her stride, the calm that didn't need armor to defend itself. She sat by the window. not to look outside, but to anchor herself. Walls do not confine warriors. Silence does not suffocate those who mastered it. Engines roared, the plane lifted. Mara closed her eyes. Not to rest, to listen. She had learned long ago, noise tells the story. Silence tells the truth. People think soldiers remember gunfire. But the memory that lingers most is the space right before it, the breath that decides everything. She remembered other aircrafts, other skis, other faces. A desert horizon. A helicopter door swinging open. The breath before stepping out, not fear, not bravery. Resolve. Her heartbeat slowed, synced with the engine hum, not because she avoided the past, but because she learned to walk beside it without letting it lead. When wheels hit ground again, she opened her eyes. New base. New air. New expectations hiding behind courtesy and curiosity. A command sergeant major greeted her stiff, formal, words clean but eyes curious. Chief Voss, we've been expecting you. Expectation. A loaded quiet. Expectation can lift or crush, depending who's receiving it. Yes, Sergeant Major, she replied. He studied her. Not the uniform. The posture. The absence of motion wasted. Your record preceded you, he said. Records are pages, she answered. People are proof. He blinked, not offended, just processing someone not built like the rest. He gestured toward the corridor. Walk with me. They moved through the facility, a highly selective joint operations leadership school. Not for officers seeking power. For soldiers expected to carry truth. Walls lined with mission flags, memorial plaques, photographs that didn't brag, they remembered. Heroes don't need frames. Memory holds what ritual can't. Mara's boots echoed softly. Every footstep a decision. Every breath a weapon she never misused. They entered a classroom overlooking a training yard. Dozens of soldiers practiced drills below, not brute force, controlled aggression. Purpose, not posture. The sergeant major nodded toward them. These are advanced candidates, chosen for discipline, potential future unit leaders. A pause. And they'll be under your instruction. She didn't nod out of pride. She nodded because responsibility is heavier than honor. When do I begin? She asked. He exhaled, something like relief that the world still had people who didn't fear readiness. Tomorrow at 600, they know who you are. She looked at the trainees again. Some moved with efficiency. Others with ego disguised as confidence. Silent assessment. Silent judgment. Silent promise. I don't need them to know who I am, she said quietly. I need them to learn who they can be. The sergeant major watched her, a slow understanding dawning in his expression. Welcome to the program, Chief. Her reply was not spoken. The set of her shoulders answered for her. That night in her quarters, a room bare except for a cot, a desk, and a locker, she sat on the edge of the bed again. Like she always did. Not ritual grounding. Every new place asks the same question. Will you lead by noise or by knowledge? She loosened her boots, sat still, eyes on the wall like she could see through it, to the field, to the past, to the future that demanded presence, not fear. A knock, gentle, hesitant. She opened the door. A young woman stood there, uniform crisp, posture unsure. Lieutenant, newly pinned bars, hope still warm in her eyes. Chief Voss. Yes. The lieutenant paused, breath catching. I read the after-action report from Ashland. Myra didn't respond. Not denial. Not discomfort. Just space given to someone who clearly needed courage to reach the end of her sentence. I wasn't there, the lieutenant continued, but what you did, the restraint. Her voice wavered. She collected herself. Soldier first, emotion second. It inspired me, she finished quietly. Mara saw it immediately, not admiration. Recognition of strength trying to shape itself into maturity. What did you learn from it? Mara asked. The lieutenant inhaled, not a breath of fear but of thought. That real power never needs to prove itself. Mara nodded once, approving without rewarding. Why did you come here? She asked softly. The lieutenant straightened. I want to lead right, not loud. There it was. Truth in its first form, unpolished but brave. Then listen more than you speak, Mara said, especially to yourself. The lieutenant's eyes glimmered, respect deeper than rank, loyalty earned before commanded. Yes, Chief. She left. Door closed softly. Not like someone escaping. Like someone guarding a gift. Mara sat back down. Leaned forward. Elbows on knees, hands clasped. She didn't chase sleep. Sleep came when peace allowed it, and tonight, peace sat beside her like a silent comrade. She thought about Riggs. Not with anger. Not satisfaction. With acceptance. Some fall because they trip. Others fall because they climb the wrong mountain their entire lives. And then she thought of the recruit she saved, the lieutenant she just guided, the whisper she once hated because they misunderstood her. Now she understood. Silence isn't for being unseen. Silence is for being unmistakable. She closed her eyes briefly, one breath, deep and grounding. Then she opened them again. The clock neared midnight. Stillness hummed like memory waiting for dawn. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number, military channel. She answered. The voice on the other end was steady, clipped, older. A tone she recognized, command layered with respect. Chief Voss. Yes. This is Naval Command Operations. Your incident file was reviewed at upper level. She didn't move. Didn't tense. You demonstrated exemplary judgment. Not pride. Not surprise. Acknowledgement. Your recommendation packet is being routed to Special Action Command. They want leaders who understand restraint, quiet authority. She said nothing not from shock, but because silence honors gravity. You'll receive contact soon, the voice finished. Prepare yourself. I am prepared, she replied. Line clicked dead. She set the phone down gently. Some people celebrate advancement. Some fear it. Mara neither celebrated nor feared. She understood. Elevation isn't reward. It's responsibility amplified. Outside, the wind brushed the barracks wall, not loud but persistent. A voice inside her, the one trained by failure, fear, and survival, whispered. Stay humble, stay ready. Stay quiet until quiet is no longer enough. Morning came with steel blue skis and boot-printed earth waiting to be shaped. Cadets assembled on the yard, crisp uniforms, nervous steps, futures in their chests like fire waiting for ignition. Mara stepped forward. The field fell silent without instruction. Not fear, anticipation. She looked across faces, hopeful, arrogant, afraid, eager, stubborn, determined. Warriors in the making. Or undisciplined minds waiting to drown in pressure. She didn't shout. Her first command was barely above a breath. Show me how you stand. Confusion rippled, then realization. Not fight. Not run. Stand. They straightened, adjusted, braced. She scanned, saw hearts, not bodies. Intent, not posture. Then she walked down the line, slow, deliberate. Boots tapping, wind holding its breath. She stopped beside a tall soldier whose chest puffed like insecurity wearing armor. Relax your pride, she said softly. It's blocking your balance. He blinked, stunned. then exhaled, shoulders lowering, stance settling. Better. She moved on. A sharp-eyed sergeant watched her intensely, breathing almost matched to hers. Learning without asking. Good. At the end of the line, she turned, not dramatic, just decisive. Her voice carried just enough. In this program, you will learn tactics, strategy, discipline, command principles. Pause. And the hardest skill of all, silence. A murmur moved through them, curiosity and fear intertwined. Silence before judgment, silence before reaction, silence before power. She took one measured breath. Those who can't control quiet will never control chaos. Wind rustled uniforms like applause that refused to be loud. Now, she said calmly, we begin. Not with weapons. Not with shouting. With breath. A lesson born in rooms where guns touched skin and discipline saved lives no bullet ever could. She watched them inhale, some steady, some shaking, some trying too hard, some not trying enough. Mara spoke again, softer than command, stronger than threat. Leadership doesn't roar, it listens. The day unfolded, drills not of muscle but mind. Exercises that tested patience, not just accuracy. Scenarios where reacting first meant failing fastest. And across the yard, one lieutenant from last night watched, awe settling into commitment. Mara never smiled, not outwardly. But inside, there was something like peace building slowly. Not pride. Purpose. Someone would leave this program leading like she did. Maybe several. And that not rank, not orders, not recognition was legacy. As the sun dipped and shadows stretched long, she dismissed the group quietly. Tomorrow they would break bad habits. Next week they would confront themselves. Eventually they would stop needing noise to feel strong. And one day, one of them might face a trembling hand holding a gun. And stay still enough to save a life. As dusk settled, she stood alone in the empty yard, breathing the kind of stillness earned only through chaos survived. Her whisper was not prayer, not confession. It was intent. Strength begins where loudness ends. She looked toward the horizon, somewhere beyond. Another test waited. Another fragile ego. Another life that might break or might rise. And she was ready. Not because she wanted to fight. Because she knew how to stand before fighting ever becomes necessary. Some warriors chase battle. Others become the reason battle hesitates to begin. She walked off the field in silence, the kind that held power, not pain. Another dawn waiting. Another mind to shape. Another truth to live. Sometimes the strongest voice is the one the world only hears after everything else falls quiet. What happens when strength becomes quiet enough to hear someone else's breaking point? Not triumph. Not glory. Responsibility. Days blurred into rhythm. Not easy rhythm, disciplined rhythm. Boots at dawn. Breath before command. A field that learned silence before noise. The candidates changed slowly, not in how they stood or saluted, but in how they paused. How they inhaled before deciding. How they looked at each other not as threats or competition, but as moving pieces in a system that only survived if ego didn't drown it. Mara noticed the smallest signs, a trainee whose foot no longer tapped in anxiety during briefings. Another who no longer barked commands, but offered direction with tone steady enough to calm panic instead of trigger it. Growth never arrives with fanfare. It arrives like dawn, unnoticed until light is already everywhere. But even progress casts shadows. One afternoon near the firing range, storms gathered overhead, thick clouds bruising the sky, wind pressing like a warning. Lightning not yet striking, but promising. Mara stood by the barrier, arms folded behind her back, eyes trained on a candidate whose shots had grown erratic. Corporal Hayes, shoulders tense, breath short, jaw tight like someone chewing through doubt. He fired again, shot wide. Curse under breath. Reload too fast, hands sloppy. Not failure. Fear. She stepped forward. Holster. He flinched. Not at her tone, it wasn't loud. He flinched at himself. Yes, Chief, he holstered but hands shook. Step away. He obeyed, boots heavy, like shame weighted his ankles. Mara watched him, not judging, studying. Panic doesn't always scream. Sometimes it hides beneath practice. What's happening? She asked. He swallowed. Nothing, Chief. Lie. In the tone, in the posture, in the tight breath between words. Mara didn't force him to confess. Truth arrives when safety does. You're not here to shoot, she said calmly. You're here to breathe. He looked confused, frustrated. I've never missed like this. You have, she replied, just not where bullets land. He blinked, wounded pride and dawning truth colliding behind his eyes. Say the thought out loud, she said softly. Silence stretched. Wind pushed dust across the ground like time, trying to nudge him forward. Finally he exhaled, I keep seeing it. What? His voice broke, small but honest. My last deployment, door breach, wrong intel, civilians inside. A pause heavy enough to bend the air. One man reached for something. I reacted, too fast, he wasn't armed. His jaw trembled. Not weakness, memory bleeding. Everyone called it justified, but I know. He stared at his hands like they betrayed him. I should have waited one more breath. Mara's eyes didn't soften, they steadied. Because empathy is not pity. It's recognition. You think punishment will make you steady, she said. It won't. He blinked, surprised by the gentleness in her tone. Punishment breaks the body. Reflection rebuilds the mind. His breath shook. I can't afford hesitation again. You don't need hesitation, she said. You need discipline. Discipline is choosing when action belongs, not replacing action with fear. She stepped closer, lowering her voice as the wind howled between them. You are not dangerous because you pulled the trigger. You are dangerous only if you stop learning from it. His eyes shimmered, tears not fallen, restraint holding them. How do you carry mistakes like that? He whispered. Mara didn't answer immediately. Truth requires timing. She looked past him for a moment at memories not shared, losses not spoken, faces that lived only in silence. You carry them with dignity, she said, not denial. And you let them shape your discipline, not your fear. The storm broke above them, one loud crack like the sky itself exhaling tension. Hayes nodded, slow, breath steadier now, not healed but anchored. Try again tomorrow, she said. He blinked, not today. Warriors don't train when they're drowning, she replied quietly. They surface first. He stood straighter, understanding deeper than obedience now. Yes, Chief. He walked off and she watched him go. Not to monitor. To witness someone choosing healing over hiding. Behind her, another soldier approached, Lieutenant Rana, the young woman who'd sought guidance that first night. You always know what to say, Rana murmured. No, Mara replied. I know when to listen. Rana nodded, thoughtful. And when to confront, the lieutenant added. Mara's gaze drifted across the range, trainees resetting targets, instructors adjusting wind flags, the world moving forward even while storms paused life in place. Not confront, Mara corrected. Align. Rana furrowed brows. Align what? Action with truth. And truth with restraint. Rana absorbed that like rain soaking dry earth. Do you ever feel tired of carrying all this? She asked softly. Mara didn't answer right away. Wind picked up, scattering dust, rattling metal, calling old ghosts to surface then leave again. Finally, tired isn't the enemy, aimlessness is. Rana nodded, words sinking deeper than instruction. Thunder cracked again overhead, gods arguing in distance. Training paused, helmets tucked, rifles cleared, soldiers jogging toward shelter. Myra did not move. Storms do not chase those who learn to breathe inside them. Rain began sharp, sudden cold. Droplets pinging steel, slapping canvas, soaking earth until everything smelled like raw soil and renewal. Rana hesitated. Chief. You go, Mara said gently. And remember, storms don't judge, they reveal. Rana ran. Mara stayed. Water soaked her uniform, hair, boots, nothing flinched. Weather does not shake those shaped by harsher seasons. Her eyes lifted to the sky, not defiant, not grateful. Present. Sometimes standing in rain is not stubbornness. It is surrender to what is beyond your control, and a reminder that you don't need to control everything to be unbreakable. When she finally walked back, water trailing her steps, trainees glanced her way, all mixing with confusion. Why stand in the storm? Because storms teach more than shelter ever will. By evening, clouds cleared, sun low, golden, exhausted but victorious. The range dried slowly. Voices rose again. Laughter somewhere. Breath filling the world again. Mara sat alone in the ready room, sharpening a training blade. Not because she needed it sharp, but because discipline doesn't clock out. A knock. Firm, controlled. Someone who learned something recently. Enter. Rana stepped in, a folder in hand. Chief, you should see this. She offered papers, evaluation forms, student reports, observer notes. Words like impactful presence, demands reflection without force, authority through silence, changed how I breathe under pressure, teaches without raising voice. She set the papers down gently. I didn't read them, she said. Not my place, but they wanted you to know. Myra closed the folder. Not touched, tempered. Recognition is not the goal. It is the noise after the work is already finished. Anything else? She asked. Rana hesitated. Then, you make people want to be better. Myra looked at her. Not with pride. With truth. That is your work, Lieutenant, not mine. Rana straightened, understanding that leadership doesn't create followers. It creates leaders. After she left, Mara sat still, listening to the hum of fluorescent lights, the quiet rustle of wind returning calm to the world. Then, her phone buzzed again. Unknown secure line. She answered. A familiar voice, calm, clipped, command threaded through each syllable. Chief Voss, final confirmation. Proceed. You're being assigned to a classified evaluation group under Strategic Response Command. Officers selected by record, discipline profile, and psychological resilience. A breath, important, not dramatic. Your transfer begins next week. You will operate under direct Joint Ops jurisdiction. Mara said nothing, not because she lacked words. Because weight should be held, not reacted to. You understand the responsibility, the voice said. Yes. And the cost? Yes. And that silence will be required beyond what most can bear. Silence answered first, then. I have lived there before. The voice softened, respect, not emotion. We know. The line cut. Mara set the phone down. Closed her eyes. Not to escape, to steady. Leadership does not elevate the self. It deepens the burden. Night filled the window. Stars distant. Quiet breathing through the base. One day soon, she would be where few could endure, places where restraint saves nations more than bullets do. She stood, rolled her shoulders once, then walked toward lights-out inspection, because no future exempts today's discipline. A recruit rushed by, nearly bumping her, froze when he realized, eyes wide. "Sorry, Chief." "Check your footing," she said gently. "Yes, ma'am." "Not sorry, steady." He nodded, spine straightened, feet planted, breath controlled. She walked past him, leaving the lesson to settle where embarrassment once sat. Outside, the flag rustled quietly, not triumphant, just enduring. An instructor approached from the dark. "You think they're ready?" he asked. "Not yet." "What's missing?" She paused, one breath, asking the right question before acting. He nodded slowly. "And what question is that?" She looked up at the stars, not romantic, not wistful. "Honest. Who am I serving, my ego or the mission?" He swallowed. Truth, never gentle when it hits the right place. "And when will they learn that?" "When they learn silence," she replied. In the distance, boots moved, radios clicked, night drills whispered determination. Mara walked the perimeter, not to check security, but to remain part of it. Quiet followed her. Not emptiness, gravity. And as wind brushed her collar and the moon traced silver along her sleeve, she whispered a thought only storms and soldiers understand. Strength is not loud. Strength listens to what fear is afraid to say. Tomorrow she would train them again. Next week she would leave for a mission without applause. And somewhere down the line, someone would face a trembling threat and remember her stillness. Not her legend, her breathing, and choose silence before violence, because that is how warriors evolve. Not by force, by discipline, and sometimes by standing still long enough to let the world catch up to what strength truly means. How does a journey end when it was never about the destination? Not with applause, not with closure, with a quiet step into the next unknown, calm not because the world softened, but because she learned to meet it without flinching. The morning of her departure arrived quietly, the kind of morning where sky and earth seemed to agree to hold their breath together. No ceremony, no crowd, just a base waking up, unaware that someone who changed it was leaving before sunrise. Her duffel rested at her feet again, same weight, different meaning. Not escape. Transition. A black SUV idled near the gate, tinted windows hiding the faces of people who lived in shadows of necessity, not secrecy. Mara stood outside her barracks one last time. The air felt still. Not empty, reverent. Soft footsteps approached. Lieutenant Rana, hair slightly messy from rushing, uniform crisp like respect itself, breath visible in the cool dawn. "You weren't going to say goodbye," Rana said, not accusing, just knowing. Mara looked at her, a steady glance, slow, measured. "Goodbyes imply endings," she replied. "This is continuation." Rana swallowed. Emotion flickered, not sadness, but the heavy pride of someone who knows they witnessed something rare. "You changed us," Rana whispered. Mara studied her, seeing not the girl who questioned silence weeks ago, but an officer whose spine now carried stillness like armor. "No," Mara corrected softly. "You changed yourselves. I only reminded you how." Rana's eyes glimmered. She blinked fast to hide it. The SUV door opened, a silent invitation. Not rushed, not demanding. Rana hesitated. "Can I ask one thing?" Mara waited. Silence means yes, without wasting breath. "How do you know," Rana asked, voice tight, "when you're ready to lead at that level?" Mara stepped closer, not dramatic, just present. "You never feel ready," she answered. "You simply refuse to run." Rana nodded, jaw clenched, breath steadying. She would be strong, not because she watched a warrior, but because she learned how to become one in silence. Mara placed a hand on Rana's shoulder, a rare gesture, not comfort but acknowledgement. "You will command well," she murmured, "because you listen before you act." Rana inhaled, shaky but purposeful. "Where will you go?" "To serve where quiet is needed." "And after that?" Mara almost smiled, an idea, not movement. "After that I will breathe, and wherever breath leads I follow." Rana stepped back. "I hope to be like you someday." Mara's reply was immediate, firm, truthful. "No, be someone better, someone new. The world doesn't need another me. It needs another disciplined voice refusing to become noise." Rana nodded, a promise made without ceremony. Mara turned toward the SUV, hand on the door. Then paused, not to look back, but to let the stillness settle like dust after footsteps. A few yards away, Corporal Hayes stood watching, posture grounded, eyes steady, rifle slung but safe. He didn't approach, didn't speak. He just nodded, slow, respectful, whole. Once he shook holding a weapon. Now he stood ready without one in his hands, because his mind held steadiness instead. Transformation never shouts. It breathes. She nodded back, equally small, infinitely meaningful. Then she entered the vehicle. No ceremony. No salute. Just a door closing and a new chapter opening in silence. The SUV rolled through the gate. Guard shack. Salute. Barrier lifted. Fort Ashland, not where she defeated someone, but where someone defeated themselves, receded behind her like a lesson the world needed to see but not celebrate. Miles passed. Fields changed. Sky shifted palettes of steel and pale gold. Inside the SUV, no one spoke. Silence wasn't awkward. It was uniform. Across from her, a man in a dark suit finally glanced her way. "You trained them well." She didn't respond. Praise is noise when mission isn't complete. He tried again. "They said you created a culture of stillness." "I didn't create it," she answered. "I returned them to it." He studied her. "Why do you think they followed you so closely?" "Because I lead myself first." A beat. He nodded slowly, respect disguised behind intelligence and authority. "You know why you're being called up, Chief?" "Yes." "Not every soldier can do what you did." Mara turned her gaze out the window, open landscape passing, simple and vast. "No soldier should," she said, "but some must." He let silence settle after that, the only answer worthy of truth. Hours later, they reached a remote installation. Fences. Cameras. A building not marked with a name, only necessity. Inside, a woman waited, commander bars glinting. Expression like carved stone, softened only by experience too heavy to name. "Chief Voss," she greeted, "welcome." Mara nodded. The woman's eyes scanned her, not suspicious, evaluating alignment like gravity meeting a mountain. "You'll shadow first," the commander said, "then integrate." "Understood." "You've been briefed this work requires emotional endurance beyond standard deployments." Mara's voice carried no pride, only certainty. "Endurance is not the absence of strain. It is refusal to surrender to it." The commander exhaled slowly, impressed not by the sentence, but by the conviction behind it. "This role isn't public." "I don't need public." "You may face situation where force must remain unused even under threat." Mara's answer was almost quiet enough to be a prayer. "Strength chooses restraint." The commander nodded. "Report at 400. Then she added softer. "And Chief, whatever you were before this, thank you for staying human." Mara paused mid-turn. Human. A word often reserved for those too weak to endure what she had endured. But here it felt like honor. She inclined her head. then left the room, door closing behind her with the dignity of a chapter turning without drama. Her new quarters were small, bare walls, a single cot, steel desk, folded linens, locker, nothing more. Good. Spaces don't define warriors. Breathing does. She sat on the cot, not exhausted, centered. Outside, an ocean wind murmured, distant, steady, timeless. The kind of wind that refuses to rush, because it knows patience shapes coasts better than storms. She unlaced her boots, then paused, fingers resting on leather, as if remembering something deeper than routine. Memory surfaced, not Fort Ashland, not the moment a gun pressed cold to her head, but the second after she disarmed Riggs, when she stood not victorious, but whole. Stillness, not triumph. Wholeness. Her breath fell into rhythm again, the one she learned long before the military, long before titles, long before fear learned her name. One inhale. One truth. Strength is not reaction. One exhale. One certainty. Strength is refusal to become what tries to break you. She lay back, hands folded on her abdomen, eyes open to darkness, unafraid. People think warriors sleep like stones. They don't. They rest like sentinels, not expecting danger, simply prepared if it comes. Somewhere, another soldier tonight would feel panic. Somewhere else, a young officer would look in the mirror and choose silence before pride. Somewhere far from combat, a woman would face a verbal bullet disguised as authority and refuse to fall. Someone she trained would breathe before reacting. Someone she never met would learn restraint from someone she touched. And the world, slower but inevitable, would shift one breath at a time. Her eyelids lowered, not surrendering to sleep, but welcoming it like an equal, not a refuge. Outside, wind softened. Inside, stillness deepened. Before sleep found her, one final thought surfaced, clear as polished steel, soft as sand untouched by war. Sometimes power doesn't speak. It refuses to be louder than truth. And she knew then, in bone and blood, that she had not been sent into the world to fight. She had been sent to witness, to steady, to teach by breath, to remind those who command that noise is nothing without restraint. Sometimes dignity doesn't raise a flag. It simply stands in silence, and the world eventually learns to stand with it. And in that stillness, her mission continued. Not loudly, not seen, not named, but felt, because real warriors don't echo. They anchor, and the strongest battles are won not by force, but by those who mastered the art of not becoming the storm they walk through. Final moral, soft, poetic, earned. Sometimes dignity doesn't shout. It waits. It listens. It steadies the world without asking for credit. True strength doesn't need noise. It breathes and lets every heartbeat become proof that power, when held quietly, saves more lives than violence ever could.